All right. Welcome, everybody, to Standing for Truth. My name is Donny. I am your host and moderator for tonight's exciting debate. Tonight, young Earth creation is on trial, and it is a privilege to have Professor David McQueen and another skeptical guy to debate this important topic. Always a fun topic to engage, the topic of young Earth creation. And so with that, let's get acquainted with our guest tonight. David, let's start with you. How have you been? And also a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I very much appreciate Charlie being willing to debate this important topic with me. I was thinking today that it was this year, it will be 50 years since I graduated undergraduate from the University of Tennessee with a degree in geology. And then I went on to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor and got a master's degree in geology. Since then, I've come back with my family here to Louisiana and have gone through a program in science education at the local university. And I ended up with a degree that's called an education specialist degree. Now, why would I even bring that up? If you go back 10 years, the degree that I received from the local university here in northern Louisiana would have been the equivalent of an educational doctorate back in the day. Now, things have changed in our neck of the woods, and it's not what it's the equivalent of it, what it once was. But it is true to call me Professor McQueen because over the years, I have been a professor at the Institute for Creation Research Graduate School in California, at East Tennessee State University many years ago, pretty much almost 50 years ago, and also associated with George Mason University near Washington, D.C. So I very much enjoy this professional opportunity. And once again, my thanks to you, Charlie.
Very good, David. I appreciate you being here and offering your time for this debate. David, you're certainly no stranger to debates at this point. Over the last couple of years, you've had many exchanges, and so you're a seasoned debater at this point. And so anybody who wants to see more from David, do check the description box of this video where I've got a playlist linked to all of his past events that you can check out. And Charlie, or another skeptical guy, it's great to have you back as well. I think it's been about a month, and we're going to keep you busy in 2024. And so how you been? And also a little bit about yourself.
I have been well. Thank you for having me back. You have learned now that I am the worst at responding to emails. I am awful at it. But yeah, things are going well. Yes, as Donnie said, I am another skeptical guy, or Charlie. I tried to be all anonymous for my first one, but then I'm like, hey, if you know my name, who cares? But yeah, so I'm Charlie. I am very new to the scientific debate scene, not a content creator by any stretch. Do not have the accolades as my honorable opponent, unfortunately, but I hope that I can put up a good fight. But like all debates, we're just here to further the conversation. Hopefully have some realizations, and yes, that is me dressed as Captain Kirk in my image, and that was not done purposefully. Besides, it was the only image that I had. But yeah, I have a degree in physics and a minor in math from James Madison University, and yeah.
That's good. I appreciate that introduction there, Charlie. And I'm glad that you decided to join us in the debate community, as you are a true professional and you offer Respectful dialogues. And as you said, we're going to make sure this is a good, clean fight because this is the debate octagon, right? And so, Dave,
Right.
Charlie, I'm glad to have you both here for tonight's debate on young Earth creation. If people want to see more from Charlie, well, like you said, you don't necessarily have a channel, but your past debate here, I have it linked in the description box for people to check out.
You own my entire online footprint, Donny.
There you go. I created
Now,
you.
Charlie, do I recall that the university you went to is in Virginia?
Yes, sir.
State of Virginia?
Yes, sir. That's where I live. Yes, sir.
That's what I thought.
Okay, gentlemen. Very good introductions. And let me go over the format briefly for our audience so they know what they are in store for. And so we got a good formal debate for everybody tonight. We're going to have 12-minute opening statements starting with David, as David is in the affirmative for tonight's debate. Then we're going to have a period of rebuttals. And so we're going to have an 8-minute uninterrupted rebuttal where the guests can engage each other's points. Then we'll have a roughly 5 to 10-minute break where the debaters can refill their coffees if they'd like to, and I'll go over some reminders and announcements for everybody. Then we'll come back for a 30-minute discussion, more free-flowing rather than a strict cross-exam. Then we'll have 5-minute closing statements, and then this is where we get you guys in the audience involved. We'll have a roughly 25-minute audience Q&A. So please, if you do have a question on tonight's topic, make sure you're sending those in and doing your best to tag me at Standing for Truth. And so with that, let's get right into our opening statement. I am excited for this. So David, we're going to hand it over to you, and you have 12 minutes for an opening statement.
I will set my timer here on my phone and be ready to go. I know it's here someplace. There we go. We will do it the simple way. Okay, and sometimes I don't glance down at my timer, Donnie. So if you would prompt me at about 10 minutes, that'll let me do my closing. Okay?
Yes.
Thank you for helping me with that. Okay. I am arguing that the Earth is young, as you can see on this part of my chart here. And my opponent is in error because he's overlooking the first critique I'm going to give to him is that for most of history, for most of the history of science, the historical majority view has been that the Earth is 6,000 years old. And so my first challenge is, since most of the fundamental discoveries in science were made prior to, let's say, 1800, certainly prior to around 1850, I would critique him for not acknowledging that a lot of the fundamental issues of science were resolved in history before the publication of Origin of Species. Now, he and I both know, I assume, that Darwin's view was not something new to the 1800s. Traces of an evolutionary view can be found in the writings of Greeks and Romans, Egyptians, can be found in a variety of places throughout the academic world. But it is the case that a lot of scientific advances were done when my second point, that until the 1700s, Ussher's view of the age of the earth being around 4,000 plus 2,000, or around 6,000 years. Ussher, as you may know, put the creation at 4004 BC. Now, I asked the audience to turn in your copy of the Quran to the first chapter of the Quran. The Quran is not divided into chapters like King James. It's divided into what are called surahs. And so let me get my copy out here, which I was looking at. There we go. So here is my copy of the Quran. And because it's written in Arabic, you start from the opposite end. But the opposite end is the equivalent of Genesis 1:1. And so let me read some of it to you and make some comments. In the name of Allah, most gracious, the most merciful, all praise and thanks are Allah's, the Lord of Alamin. Now, that Arabic word means mankind, demons, and all that exist. The most gracious, most merciful, the only owner and only ruling judge of the day of recompense, which is the day of resurrection. As a Christian, you're already beginning to see that I don't agree with the theology of this, but let's keep going. You alone we worship. You alone we ask for help for each and everything. Guide us to the straight way. Now, we need to fully understand what's meant, what was meant by Muhammad in this comment about guide us to the straight way. His use of the word guidance falls into two kinds, according to scholars that have studied Islam. One aspect of the guidance comes only from Allah. In other words, Allah opens one's heart to receive the truth from belief to disbelief in Islamic monotheism. Now, keep in mind, there are only a few religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, that talk about the creation, that mention the great flood. And so part of this straight way he talks about, I'm in agreement with, but not all of it. The second aspect of it is through preaching Allah's messengers and the pious preachers that preach the truth. In other words, they call it Islamic monotheism. There are footnotes throughout the Quran. Christian critics consider the Quran to be plagiarized in a lot of ways from the Bible. But here's a comment that has meant a lot to me. Both in this world and in the hereafter, I am the nearest of all the people to Jesus. In Arabic, it's called Isa, and the son of Miriam. This is a variation of one of our daughters' names, Mary. The prophets are parental brothers. Their mothers are different, but the religion is one. Now, why in the world, in a debate like this, would I even bring up an analogy or even an argument that deals with the Quran before we turn back to Genesis 5 and look at the difference between a genealogy and a chronology. I'll use myself as an example. My dad was born in 1914. My grandfather, McQueen, was born the year after Darwin died. And so that's my 3-generational link back to Darwin. So the fact that we have that genealogy of mine doesn't tell a great deal until I tell you when my dad was born and when my grandfather was born. Then we can use those numbers to bring us up to 2024. So when I turn to Genesis chapter 5 and I look at the way that it's written, and I'm going to read from the King James tonight. This is the book of the generations of Adam in the day that God created man in the likeness of God made he him. Male and female created he them and blessed them and called their name Adam in the days they were created. And Adam lived 130 years. He had a son in his own likeness, called his name Seth. And the days of Adam after he had Seth as his son were 800 years. He had other sons and daughters, and all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. And Seth lived 100 years, 105 years, and begat Enos. And then as you go through the rest of Genesis chapter 5, you have a link between a genealogy and a chronology. Most scholars that have researched Bible history come up with Abraham being born around 2000 BC. Obviously, we live 4,000 years now after the birth of Abraham. The conservative scholars that accept the genealogies and the comments in the book of Genesis as gospel truth will say, okay, within reason, we can put Abraham's birth at about 2,000 years after creation. So by working through these Bible accounts, we can come up with a 6,000-year-old earth. Now, why do I bring that up as an important point? The reason I enjoy debating on Standing for Truth is
David, you got just over a minute left. Just over a minute.
Gives me an opportunity to suggest that the Bible is a trustworthy document. Trustworthy in the creation, in the Great Flood. As a geologist, I'm interested in the effects of the Great Flood, but I'm even more interested in bringing us up to the time of the Lord Jesus. Thank you very much, Donny.
Okay, David, thank you very much for that roughly 12-minute opening statement. We're now going to hand it over to another skeptical guy, and you have 12 minutes as well for an opening statement. The floor is yours, Charlie.
Excellent. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I will not be taking 12 minutes. So my evidence for the fact that the Earth is 4.543 billion years old is going back to the radiometric dating. Uranium to lead, rubidium to strontium, potassium to argon, samarium to neodymium, carbon to nitrogen. This is well-documented science. The calculations in which we are able to find these times and date the oldest rocks, about 4 billion years old, in the Canadian Shelf, I believe is what it's called, is derived from calculus, which given to us from Isaac Newton. When we derive the decay constant from the number of particles over time divided, the derivative of the number of particles over time over number of particles, which equals to the activity. The activity is a function of time divided by the number of particles as a function of time. We're able to get the decay constant. Then from there, we are able to use the half-life to calculate the age of a rock. As we see in organic organisms, the carbon going to nitrogen, and when we look at rocks, we see rubidium going to strontium, or potassium going to argon. Now, no one is saying those methods are perfect. However, the percent error is negligible when you're looking at orders of magnitudes of billions. So that is my opening statement, and that is my evidence. It comes purely from the math, and it comes purely from the scientific discoveries that modern science has revealed. So, like I said, not 12 minutes at all.
All right, Charlie, nothing wrong with being short and sweet. And we've got radiometric dating as a good argument to engage for rebuttals and discussion. So, Charlie, I do appreciate that. We're now moving into rebuttals. And so for rebuttals, we've got 8 minutes, roughly 8 minutes. And David, we'll throw it back to you. And so whenever you're ready, David, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And once again, Donny, if you would tell me when I'm 5 minutes into this, that'll allow me to round it out and close it out.
Yes.
Charlie, I hope you have known from looking at previous debates of mine that I once worked for Bob Gentry, a scientist who wrote the book Creation's Tiny Mystery, a book I would recommend you buying. This title of this, Tiny Mystery, comes from a comment that Dalrymple made at the Arkansas creation evolution trial that ended up going to the Supreme Court eventually. But Dalrymple, as you may know, is a very senior scientist, was at least when this book came out in the 80s. Bob Gentry has passed away. I don't know if Dalrymple is still alive or not, but at any rate, he dismissed what is in the picture here, which is a type of halo on the cover here. And then in the back, there are other halos that are polonium halos that have 3 rings, 4 rings, depending on which halo you're looking at. The conclusion of the critics of Gentry's work say that all of the polonium halos, which have 1, 2, or 3 rings, are simply derivative of a uranium halo. And yet Gentry, when I worked for him at Oak Ridge National Labs in the mid-70s, one of the things he had me do was polishing down specimens of polonium halos that look like this. And when I did that, I was there at his side as he did an electron microprobe analysis of the polonium halos. Now, if you buy this book, Charlie, you'll find in it Gentry's reproduced articles in Scientific American and Nature and so forth. So these were peer-reviewed journal that he submitted beginning in the late 60s. And he then switched his focus. His critics said, oh, these evidences in mica must be secondary. You can't argue that the granites in Canada and places that Bob Gentry went to in Europe, you can't argue that these granites cooled in some cases in less than 3 minutes in order to capture these halos. Well, Gentry was aware of these criticisms. And so he did this, and I'm reading from page 41 of his book. I wrote up these new results and submitted them for publication in Science, a journal with an outstanding reputation among all the scientific disciplines. My first draft, submitted in 1967, concentrated on the experimental results and only included an oblique reference to my conclusions, implications. As a result, the two anonymous reviewers were chosen to review the manuscript. This is what Science does as a matter of course. My revised manuscript that I sent back to the same two reviewers said, the experimental evidence indicates the inclusions of polonium halos contain specific alpha emitters responsible for the halos at the time when the mica was crystallized. And as such, these particular halos represent extinct radioactivity. Now, what does he mean by that? He's trying to put these halos, I need to switch to the other side here. He's trying to put these halos into the standard igneous petrology framework. The idea that magma moved up from the mantle to the crust, solidified over millions of years, and somehow captured these polonium halos. But if you've got 1 million years to solidify, halos with halos, which must have a solid to be preserved in, at 3 minutes, you can't have that. So they were very critical of this. Now, I began working with Gentry in my undergraduate days and followed his work into my research at the University of Michigan. And in the classes I took there, physical chemistry, for many of you in the audience, you don't want me to say that word. Charlie, there were bumper stickers in my day that said, honk if you pass PChem. So there's a lot of physical chemistry that people want to forget. Reminds me of a comment that a colleague of mine has made about certain aspects of anatomy and physiology. They're only so valuable to a physician up to a certain point. But after you get out of med school, it's easier just to forget them all the different types of cranial nerves, and that kind of detail. Well, people have drawn the same analogy
1 minute left
to the radioactive halos. My argument to you, Charlie, is that if you go back and look at these reports that Bob Gentry presented, they provide, I think, objective scientific evidence that certain granites cooled in less than 3 minutes. Thank you, Donny.
Thank you, David, for that 8-minute rebuttal. Before I hand it to Charlie, I'll let the audience know that, yes, I'm all caught up on questions. I appreciate the questions that have come in so far. As always, we have an audience that is very engaged in tonight's topic, the topic of young earth creation. And so, Charlie, we're going to hand it over to you. And the floor is yours, my good man. You got 8 minutes.
Yay. Oh, gosh, I hate this when the screen zooms in. All I see is my face. It's too big. I've got way too big of a head.
You look good, Charlie.
Thank you. Professor McQueen, I will absolutely go and look at those reports by Bob Gentry. I have it written down here in my notes. And I see your comment that certain granites cooled in less than 3 minutes. So let me dispel I am not a geologist, and my fair opponent has studied geology much longer than I am. So I am just basing this off of what I have researched prior and all of that. So you say certain granites cooled in less than 3 minutes. However, that doesn't really address the replacement of those radioactive isotopes, like rubidium to strontium. Just because it cooled, that does not necessarily equate to the replacement of more stable isotopes, like rubidium to strontium. However, I wanted to backtrack to something that you had that you said in your opening about how up until I believe you said 1850s. Forgive me if I am wrong with the date there, but you said up until around I think it was like 1850s, 1800. It was taught or understood that the Earth was 6,000 years old, or around that time. Now, my problem with that is, sure, I mean, I'm not 100% sure what they taught, what was being taught back then, but I'll take your word for it and assume that it's true. But we have developed so much more in terms of technology and scientific understanding that it's sort of irrelevant as to what was being taught then. Modern science has confirmed over multiple different disciplines that the age of the Earth is 4.5 BYA. And conversely, and once again, I will go look at what Bob Gentry said. But you were using the Bible as your evidence, but the Bible is a self-confirming book in the sense that it is only true because the Bible itself says it's true. And it was written by men who are by the Bible standards fallible. So I have trouble with the statement that the Bible is able to keep up with modern science. Now, and that's not to say that I completely ignore all of what the Bible says and believe that it is all outdated. But as far as modern and novel scientific discoveries, I don't think the Bible can hold a candle to the modern scientific process that was able to sniff out 4.5 billion years old. The Bible was written at a time before radioactive dating. In the 1850s, radioactive dating it wouldn't have been discovered yet, or it wouldn't have been done. Once again, my scientific history is abysmal, so if I am wrong there, I will leave that to the court of public opinion. But yeah, so my question to you is, does granite cooling, which you said is in less than 3 minutes, is that implying as well that the unstable radioactive isotopes are being replaced by the stable isotopes, i.e., so if in granite there is a large level of rubidium or potassium. Once again, I'm not sure what is in granite, but let's just say it's rubidium, right? Is the granite cooling turning that rubidium into the strontium? Is that what you're saying by cooling? Or are you more implying from a less hot state? In which case that would not explain the result done by the calculations of radiometric dating. So, Professor, I yield the floor back to you.
Okay, Charlie, thank you very much for that rebuttal. We've now concluded, gentlemen, opening statements and rebuttals. We've got some excellent points on the table: radiometric dating, chronologies, and genealogies from historical sources, polonium radio halos, and of course your question here on granite. Charlie, I'd like to make sure we engage all of those in the discussion, but we do have a roughly 5-minute break before we get into our discussion period. I will go over some announcements and reminders over this time. David?
If you go ahead and drop my video, I will go get some hot tea.
I'm going to get some tea as well. Professor McQueen and I are on the same wavelength.
Okay, very good. Hot tea sounds good. And so while you guys do that, I will go over some announcements and reminders. Enjoy your 5-minute break, gentlemen. Well earned. Okay, so we've got a lot for everybody in the coming months. I will first give a shout out to this event that I am pumped for. So anybody who follows this channel knows that we host a lot of debates, but also open mic debates. And this gives the opportunity for critics and skeptics, those that might not necessarily want to engage in a formal debate. Well, this that gives them the opportunity to join us in an open mic debate. And so we got an epic open mic coming up in this month, at the end of this month, the 22nd. So John Mackay, Joe Hubbard, they're going to be here defending young earth creation and the Genesis flood. They both know their stuff on the topic of origins, that's for sure. And so I'm excited to see some solid open mic impromptu discussion. And since the topic at hand for this open mic will be the Genesis flood, young earth creation, I'd like to get some solid debate or interaction on geology, whether it's limestone or other common challenges or objections, because John and Joe are both geologists. And so they're going to have the answers for you. I'm excited for that. We got some good theology debates coming up as well. I am planning on doing a video to premiere either tomorrow or Sunday, just January in review. January was a huge month for us. We had a ton of events. As a matter of fact, we kicked off the month with an in-person debate between Kent and Grayson. And we have another in-person debate coming up on February 14th. This time it's going to be Jackson Rowe and Kent. And so they'll be live at Dinosaur Adventureland. They'll be debating in person in a similar manner to Kent and Grayson. And I will be moderating from my studio. And so we're going to try and get as many of those kinds of debates this year as we can. I think they're exciting. They change things up a little bit. So we got this 2 verse 2 coming up at the end of this month as well. The Immaculate Conception, Biblical and Ancient ? Protestants versus Catholics. These kinds of debates are always a lot of fun. They bring in a solid audience. We did a 2 verse 2 last year at some point, and it got a lot of good feedback. So this one will be Turretin Fan and CJ Cox as the Protestants versus William Elbrecht and Elijah Yassi as the Roman Catholics for this debate. Again, the Immaculate Conception. I think this one's going to be a lot of fun. In February, we got a lot of debates on eschatology. So eschatology is a big subject, one of my favorite subjects. And I know the audience appreciates these debates as well. They are comprehensive. They're technical at times. Eschatology is not the easiest subject. And so we got a lot of informed debaters for the next couple months to engage this topic, many subtopics within eschatology. So we got the great Matthew 24 debate coming up. Phelan McFallon, Pastor Tommy McMurtry. What's the best understanding in Matthew 24? I'm excited for this one. We've also got, and this is one of our main events next month, David Preston and Steve Gregg, both seasoned debaters. They've both had many different exchanges on a whole lot of different topics. And so this is definitely going to be one to remember. They're coming in equipped for this topic, put it that way. So this is the Great Israel Debate. What is God's plan for Israel? This is in February as well. I've got them all set. So if you check out the upcoming live stream section, everything for February should be there except for 2. So I just booked an event with Dr. Dan Biddle from Genesis Apologetics. He'll be releasing his film, The Ark in the Darkness, in theaters, as a matter of fact, in March. And so my co-host, Matt, Sam, and I, we will be interviewing Dr. Dan Biddle at the end of the month on that film, just to hype people up because it's going to be exciting. Coming up in just about 6 days, if I'm not mistaken, we got the great Millennium debate, Dr. Robertson Jenis and Phelan McFallon. Premillennialism versus amillennialism. Controversial topic, always a lot of fun. And I am excited to see what Robert and Phelan are going to bring to the table for this debate. We also had last week an epic debate. We almost set a new record. We had about 600 live watching this intense showdown. Sean Griffin and Anthony Rogers. Does the Bible teach the doctrine of the Trinity? I am in the, I would say, middle stages currently of setting up a debate on soteriology between Dr. Bob Wilkin and Sean Griffin. And so that'll be a huge event if we can sort out these details. So fingers crossed for that one. And Anthony Rogers, he'll be back as well. Right here, he'll be debating Andrew Griffin coming up. So guys, there is a lot to look forward to this year. This is just a snapshot of the overall material that we have for you. This will be a debate on the deity of Christ, the first of 2 between Andrew Griffin and Anthony Rogers. With that, I see Professor McQueen is back, and our awesome debaters for tonight are recharged. I imagine they had a relaxing break, and I see the steam coming out of that mug, David. So we're in for a good, heated exchange. Gentlemen, just kidding. This is going to be a cordial exchange. So, all right, let's do this. Charlie, can you give me an audio test real quick? Yeah, it looks like now your audio is not coming in, but I don't.
There we go. Okay. I had my hardware muted. Yeah. I lied. I did not get tea. I didn't have time because I make it a very special way with milk and sugar.
I make it in a very crude way, and so I was able to get back.
Well, for the classic vanilla Coke, which is Coke for people who don't like Coke as much.
You got a vanilla Coke. David's got a tea. I got a fresh coffee. So, gentlemen, let's have some fun, as we usually do. The time not utilized in opening statements and rebuttals, I have thrown into the discussion. So we got a solid 40-ish minutes for discussion here, which is good because it looks like we got a lot of topics on the table. The topic being young earth creation on trial. David, since Charlie ended with his rebuttal, if I remember correctly, let's give you the opportunity to pick the first point or the first topic to engage. Go ahead, gentlemen.
My challenge to my newfound friend Charlie is to take a mineral. This is a quartz crystal, one of the types of minerals that's in a granite. If you add to that mica, which is what's called a phyllosilicate, and the different layers of a mica are like these index cards that fit together. And then the third component of a granite is a mineral called feldspar, which we'll put to one side for a moment. my challenge to Charlie and to the part of our audience that understand mineralogy is this. Gentry's argument for all the years that I knew him and all the way up until the end of his life a couple of years ago was that his microprobe analysis of these kind of halos that have 1 or 2 or 3 rings showed that the interior of that ring was unique. Now we need a bit of an explanation which Bob Gentry himself enjoyed was to drop Alka-Seltzer into a glass of water and see the bubbles come off, and then imagine a rapid freeze of that Alka-Seltzer that would actually capture the bubbles. Another way of thinking about it that deals with the chemistry of rocks a bit more scientifically is to use the argument from physical chemistry. And my physical chemistry training was at Michigan 50 years ago, but it has followed me. And if you know a lot about physical chemistry, it's haunted me all those years in between. But at any rate, I do understand enough of it to understand what's called eutectic crystallization. Now, what that means, and if I put this quartz crystal really close to the camera, you may be able to see inside it some what look like bubbles. Well, those bubbles are called fluid inclusions, and they allow us to know what the chemistry of the liquid that this solidified from. And by looking at those, what are called fluid inclusions, you can actually see unique things, like if there were any, what would be a good mineral, any calcite in the fluid inclusions, that would be included in the magma. But what is my point? My point is this. Some of the data that Gentry has gathered, and I might add, others have confirmed through subsequent research in the years since Gentry left Oak Ridge National Labs. The evidence shows that some of these very short-lived halos with half-lives of polonium-210, polonium-214, some of the half-lives are within minutes, give objective evidence of a rapid cooling. In the geology side of creation science, we need evidence to show that these granites cooled quickly. Why? The evolutionary critic often comes to us and says, wait, no, McQueen, you don't even understand Geology 101. You can't have these granites cooling over a period of 3 minutes. They've got to be millions of years. That's the point.
Thank you, David. Charlie, let's throw it back to you. It does say you're muted on your end. You might have to click the unmute button and go ahead.
I muted myself because I was munching on some veggie straws. It's got a little bit peckish. So, Dave, Professor McQueen, I just wanted to confirm something that you said about the halos, that some of the minerals or some of the isotopes have half-lives of minutes, which show that they cooled very fast.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I have some more data I can give you, but your perception of what these halos with very few rings mean in contrast to a uranium halo is exactly right.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I just wanted to understand that. And
Yeah.
and I 100% will grant that there are obviously rocks and minerals are going to have many isotopes, many different isotopes in them, which I'm sure you would agree, some with shorter
Right.
half-lives and some with longer half-lives.
Yes.
But when we see that the makeup of these minerals is primarily one decay product over the other, we're going to the science will say, like, if it's argon 40, right? We'll be able to know, okay, what does argon 40 decay from? Potassium 40, which has a half-life about 1.25 billion years. And just because I know there are some people in the comments who are going to be like, he's reading off notes. I am reading off notes. I do not memorize half-lives or decay products in my head. At one point, potassium argon is 1.25 billion years. So sure, yeah, there are going to be things that decay a lot quicker than other radioactive material. But when we see that it's primarily a larger percentage of the makeup is argon 40 or some decay product, then that's how we are going to date them. It's going to be an average of a majority of what that rock is. And when we see that it's 90% strontium or whatever, then that's how we know the age of the stone. Once again, I'm not a geologist, so this is just what my research has culminated to.
But I do want to comment, if I may, Donny, because many people like you are logical thinkers, and it's a matter of using an argument based on what you can find out and see. So let me add something to what you and others in the audience can research. The issue that has become so important is there any value in a young Earth in contrast to a value of an old Earth? Some mistakenly think that by knowing the age of a granite, for example, in evolutionary years, of this granite in England is 1 billion, this granite in Scotland is 2 billion, this granite in the Canadian Shield is 3 billion. It turns out there is no value. And I was taught this at Michigan. It's a kind of a neat story. One of my professors challenged us to say, okay, I want you to find out what a 10 granite is. In other words, it's well known in the history of mining in Cornwall, and the Cornish miners would go looking for granites that had 10 in them. And then they would establish a mine and get that 10, mix it with zinc, mix it with antimony and other compounds, and make the famous pewter vessels that are known in the history of England. That focus came over to America. And when we would go on field trips from Ann Arbor, which is in the southern part of Michigan, all the way up to the upper peninsula of Michigan, we would ask, I would, and others would ask, well, here are these basalts that have copper in them. Do we know that the copper is there because there's copper a million years before in this particular rock, and it was eroded out and deposited in the Keweenawan area around basalts and so forth? And the answer is no. The answer is you can't predict which granite will have either antimony or tin in the example that I start out with. You can't predict that. And so we need to understand that minerals, and I have spoken about this on Standing for Truth, and you can find it in my list of debates. The mineral riches that we have on Earth, whether it be petroleum, natural gas, or copper, lead, zinc, gold, silver, these are all a gift of God to us in our civilization. The Michigan copper deposits that I've spoken about, if you look up in an electrical engineering book, you can actually find Michigan copper, which formed the standard for the American electrical industry. So the amount of resistance, the voltage, we'll use those two, the voltage and the resistance of Michigan copper formed a standard for the whole industry. My argument is that God gave us these resources as a gift. When I've spoken in the past about petroleum geology and natural gas, when I've spoken about these things in the past, I've pointed out that a lot of people say, well, only if Moses had turned right at the Red Sea instead of left, then the Jews would have had all of that area of riches in what is now modern Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Of course, that's a foolish way to think about it, because God structured that for our modern world. Thank you, Donnie.
Charlie, back to you with a response if you'd like.
Yeah, no worries. So, and I do apologize if you find my restating what you said back to you tedious. I just don't want to misquote you or.
I want you to be clear, Charlie. So go right ahead.
Yes, I appreciate that. So if I understand what you're saying, once again, please correct me if I am wrong, that the age of the minerals doesn't really matter, because it is your belief and what the Bible teaches or alludes to, that they were a gift from God anyway. Am I in the ballpark?
Yeah, you're in the ballpark, but I want to make one caveat there. All of my academic training, going back to Tennessee in the 70s, early 70s, and at Michigan, I have heard about the kinds of rocks that you can find. They'll be fresh. You break them open, and you can look at the uranium thorium ratios, the lead ratios, and figure out their age in geologic time. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that was made clear to me as I would press my professors, both at Tennessee and also at Michigan, and I would say to them, well, wait, now, how do you know what, number one, the initial conditions are? How do you know how much lead might be in the rock to start with? Because you can't very well do uranium lead unless you have some idea of what the primordial lead is. Their standard answer would run something like this: oh, McQueen, you foolish young man. You know that the earth is old.
Is he gone for you as well?
Oh, yes. Okay, I was going to ask you the same question. So
okay.
It's not just you, not just me. So
okay.
It is me. So thanks for pointing that out. What we'll do is just pause the timer. We're about 15 minutes in, and we will wait for him to get his connection back, and then we'll let you respond Charlie, in the meantime, I will remind the audience that, yes, we are going to be doing a Q&A. And so I'm all caught up. Yes, our Q&As are sometimes the best parts of these debates. So we got a lot of...
They're always fun.
Yes.
The people here your followers are very, very nice.
Well, you know what? That's a requirement. If you're going to be a subscriber to Standing for Truth, you got to be very, very nice. And so I guess what we'll do is give your upcoming debate with Kent, since your first debate with Kent, which we had an open mic that followed it. Lots of great feedback, lots of views. And so we got a round 2 coming up. I guess we're just going to make it a full trilogy. The Dr. Dino versus another skeptical guy debate trilogy. So that's coming up on the 12th, if I'm not mistaken. And so, yeah, people need to make sure they got the notification bell hit for that one. And also, I noticed there were some people in the chat talking about poly-straight trees. And so we have another open mic. Last month, we had a couple open mics, one with Paul Price on dinosaur soft tissue, more or less. And then we had one with David Winsberg on the heat problem. So in March, we got Paul Price back on again. This will be an open mic on poly-straight trees. And so that should be fun. All skeptics, non-skeptics are certainly welcome to join. And then at the end of this month, we've got John Mackay and Joe Hubbard, who will be here for an open mic on young earth creation, the Genesis flood, but really just origins in general.
They look like the same person.
Yeah, well, you know what? They work together. They're basically same backgrounds in education.
Okay. So
this should be good, though. So, Charlie, hopefully you can make it to some of these open mics. We'd love to have discussions with you.
I'd love to. I'd love to. I like this. I like debating. It's fun.
Yes, and you make for some good cordial back and forth. I'm enjoying the technical nature of this debate on radiometric dating and polonium radio halos. And so hopefully we can get David back here. I'm going to give him a text and see if he's going to be able to make it in. And so what I'm going to do, just so I can get him on the phone, is do a mid-show countdown. So we're going into a mid-show countdown in 3, 2, 1. Okay, good news. David did say he just had a power issue with his computer. He's rebooting it, and so he should be back here in 2 minutes, which was about a minute ago. And so I guess it's going to be a debate between the moderator and Charlie for the next minute. So let's see if we can give the audience a solid minute showdown. Charlie,
You're wrong. I'm right. I win.
Yeah, there we go. Charlie wins. I cap out. Now, I will say there are some questions that have come in. Maybe
I know I have. Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. Here's T-Rock. Firstly, we are hoping to set something up between T-Rock and another skeptical guy in the future on young Earth creation. Me too. We want to make 2024 the year of debates. That was our goal for 2023, and I think we did it. We had some seriously good debates, and we're going to try and top that in 2024. So feel free to speak to this if you'd like to, Charlie. He's asking if what your thoughts are on the zircons that start out with zero-daughter isotopes, if you're familiar with that one.
Can I ask you why he thinks zircons start out with zero-daughter isotopes? Hang on. Zircon. Nothing.
It might be one of those points that needs to be elaborated on. I guess I'll ask you one of my own questions on the topic. Have you looked into the C14 issue that they found in diamonds? They found detectable levels of carbon-14 in diamonds that are supposed to be billions of years old, right? They're found deep within the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would generally be resistant to cosmic ray bombardment in the atmosphere, which basically produces C14. And so the argument goes, if diamonds and then the layers that they're found in really are billions of years old, there shouldn't be any detectable levels of C14. The C14 should have decayed away. But the fact that we find detectable levels of C14 in these diamonds tells us that the diamonds are not billions of years old. Any thoughts on that? Have you heard of that point before, Charlie?
I haven't, but I'm just, well, and once again, I'm not a mineralogist, so a lot of this I was like, I'm gonna look up and then try to figure it out. But what is the carbon isotope in diamonds? Is it C14?
C14.
It is C14 in diamonds.
And so basically,
no, it looks like it's C12.
But right, but the C14 that's found in the carbon should basically been decayed away.
But that only applies to living organisms. That's my sort of rebuttal to that, is that we only really use carbon dating when it applies.
I need to turn a light out. I'll be right back.
Okay. Good to have David back. Charlie, feel free to finish your thoughts.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just saying, I mean, we only really use carbon dating as it applies to living organisms, and when it comes to minerals, which aren't living organisms, C12 and C14 in diamonds, probably a C13. Yeah, from what I'm seeing here, it looks like it's mainly C12 and C13. I'm sure there could be C14 in there, but the C14 dating only really applies to living organisms, which is my understanding there. But
you brought up a very good point, because even the creation science community were shocked when any carbon at all was found in diamonds, assuming they had blasted up from the mantle maybe a million years ago. You wouldn't expect any carbon-14 at all in them. But the fact that there is detectable carbon-14, that is a huge blow to my fellow geologists that study the origin of diamonds. The diamonds that are routinely obtained in the big mines in South Africa have blasted up from in some cases, all the way from the mantle itself, according to the evolutionary viewpoint, right up to the area in South Africa where they're found. These are called kimberlites. And so the issue you bring up, Charlie, is an important one.
Donny brought it up.
If I could, Charlie. So I guess Charlie's rebuttal was that, well, C14 dating would only apply, and correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, to organic material, living organisms, for example, that have died and now the C14 is decaying away. They're not taking in anymore from the atmosphere because they're dead. So does this?
That's
okay.
my understanding. Yeah.
Okay.
And what you have said, my friend, is absolutely true. Even the creationist community initially didn't know what to do with the data, because we had always assumed that we could use carbon-14 dating back to maybe the beginning of the flood. The evolutionary community says under certain circumstances, carbon-14 might work back to 40,000 BC, but it was a shock to us, and certainly to the evolutionary community that looked into it, that there should be any at all in diamonds.
So should that C14 then have basically decayed away, even in the diamonds, even though it's not necessarily organic material, David?
That's correct. The assumption has always been that when those diamonds were blasted up through the upper mantle into the crust, that they were blasted up so quickly that they never could have picked up any carbon-14 from the rocks that they were being blasted through. But the ongoing work, and I have to refresh, Charlie, what I was always taught in my years at the Institute for Creation Research. The idea that Dr. Morris sent us out to is that we work for the Institute for Creation Research, not the Institute for Creation Answers. And so I don't know the full answer to this fascinating issue about diamonds, but it is an example of an ongoing creation science research project. Many of the critics that I've encountered over the last couple of years of working with Donny, when they have debated me, they have said, McQueen, you really should be a pastor. You should be some sort of Bible teacher, because there's no science in this.
Any thoughts, Charlie?
Yeah,
and then...
so I am not 100% sure. I mean, it's a great question because it really knocked me off my game. I do not know about the C14 in diamonds. I would not be so educated. I would not be educated enough to speak with any degree of certainty on that. Just from my cursory research I see a lot of, just sort of on Google, I see a lot of like answers in Genesis talk about it. I see a lot of creation ministries talking about it. Then I see like a few papers talking about it. I'd have to go and read the papers, which I'm happy to do. But I don't have.
We'll have
right
to,
now.
You and I'll have to have another debate in a couple of months, and that'll give us both opportunities to research things.
Absolutely, sir.
Let me jump in.
Appreciate that.
I appreciate that banter. Charlie and I were just killing a couple minutes as we waited for you, David. So we had to figure out what to talk about. We decided to discuss C14 and diamonds for a little bit there. But now that you're back, let us get back on track. I'll resume the timer. And gentlemen, if you remember what you were discussing or engaging before our impromptu break here, feel free to continue. Why don't we throw it back to Charlie and allow him?
Yeah, I think David and I were planning about teaching a salsa class somewhere on Wednesday nights. I think
that sounds about right.
I would fail.
Yeah, I have two left feet. I don't remember what
Well, let's do
Mr.
this. Actually, I'll jump in and help organize things. So since we're at the 16-minute mark, young Earth creation's on trial, if I'm not mistaken, gentlemen. So
Yes.
let's now, because we spent some time on radiometric dating there. We also spent a lot of time on radiometric dating in the rebuttals. So David, let's throw it to you. Since you're in the affirmative, can you pick another line of evidence, whether it's the decay of the magnetic field or something in the world of geology, to convey to the audience, and then we'll allow Charlie to respond.
And the prompt that you gave me, Donnie, is exactly what I want to go over to. I have a chart on the other side of the kitchen here that talks about the decay of the Earth's magnetic field. Let me go get it, because that's actually a very good argument for a young Earth, because in my understanding of the origin of the Earth's magnetic field, it points to an Earth in the thousands of years, not millions of years. So let me go over here and get it.
Did you have any preliminary thoughts on that, Charlie, as David goes to grab his chart there?
Yeah, well, about the decay, it looks like, from what my understanding is that over time, this is according to NASA, the magnetic field waxes and wanes. Just in general, it's like cyclical. So whether one could use that to prove the age of the Earth in any context, both defending young Earth or defending or defending old Earth, for lack of a better word, I don't know, because it looks like it's completely cyclical, just from what NASA says here. It, according to them, it causes the magnetic north and south poles to gradually shift and to even completely flip locations every 300,000 years or so. That's what.
Okay. And before I hand it to you, David, just to reiterate, just so we're all on the same page, basically you were pointing out, Charlie, that it waxes and wanes. It's cyclical in its decay, and so it's not necessarily linear or exponential. It's up and down. Is that more or less your point there?
Yeah, that's what NASA says.
Okay, David, we'll throw it over to you to.
Here's a counter argument for that. I was privileged to know Dr. Barnes, an ICR scientist, physicist that had worked through this years ago. And the basic argument is we do have some data that deals with the strengths of the Earth's magnetic field. Now, the x-axis here is time. And you notice I've started it around 1800 and brought it up to present. The reason I started at 1800 is that's when we had the physics to first be able to measure the strength of the Earth's magnetic field. Now, the magnetic field is, I was looking for a unit to talk about, but we'll just talk about it generally here. So it's time on the x-axis and strength on the y-axis. And so the actual data from 1800 to present shows that the Earth's magnetic field was higher in the past. The magnitude of the magnetic field was higher in the past, and it has been decaying in the exponential way you see. Now, the way I was taught as a young geologist was, well, that's true, but because of plate tectonics and because of the movement of the continents and the signature that we see on the ocean floor, we can assume that about every 10,000 years, this magnetic field regenerates. Now let me put my poster down and use my hands to add hopefully a little bit more clarity to this. Those of you that have gone through high school physics may remember what's called the right-hand rule. And that's the idea that if you have an electric current that is flowing in the direction of my fingers around, say, a ball or a cylinder, that electric current will generate perpendicular to the plane of the flow a magnetic field. And so the way geologists use this, they say, well, there must be an equatorial current in the mantle, lower crust, because the movement of that is generating something we can measure, and that's the magnetic field at the North Pole and the South Pole. In my research and training, the location, latitude and longitude of the North Pole has changed in the last 200 years. And there are maps you can go to in magazines and in journals that will show you that the magnetic North Pole has moved over the years. Well, from a creation standpoint, we don't have any problem with the North Pole moving, but what we do have a problem with is show us the physics that would allow the regeneration of this dynamo every 10,000 years going back 4 billion years. And that's my challenge to my opponent is what is your thinking about the regeneration of the Earth's magnetic field? I don't see Donny on board.
Yeah,
here.
Donny left. I was waiting for my cue, but
I'm going to get a sip of water. You think about what your answer would be.
yeah, that is an interesting question, and my electromagnetism knowledge is that was a very difficult class. E&M was a very difficult class, so my knowledge might be a little bit haphazard here. But this waning could happen just from what NASA is saying here. There being just insufficient energy in Earth's upper atmosphere. So, right, electricity and magnetism are, as we both know, not independent. They are both related to. They're both very strongly related to each other. With lower energy in the atmosphere, then that would weaken the magnetic field, which then could increase by any number of ways. Fluctuations in temperature, fluctuations in air, in the compounds in the atmosphere. There's really any number of reasons for why the magnetic field could wane.
Well, let me jump in here with a criticism of that viewpoint. And this is the way the criticism goes. What you say is true. There could be some physical process in the Earth's oceans or in the upper mantle that might cause a variation in the Earth's magnetic field. But the core of the argument is that when you actually go back and look at the data, in other words, when did we begin measuring the strength of the Earth's magnetic field? And the answer is around the 1800s. from that time to today, we've seen the Earth's magnetic field diminish. Not quite to zero, but it is diminishing. Now, when I have challenged my evolutionary colleagues over the years about this, they've said, well, McQueen, you and I and everybody that we know that is of our generation, born around 1952 when I was born, and then coming forward to being a 70-year-old man, by the time the Earth's magnetic field really does decay, all of us will be dead. So who knows? Well, I don't like that argument. That's not a good argument. You can't turn to the scientific community and say, oh, believe me, but statistics say I should be dead by 73 years. So I've only got 2 more years to be on Standing for Truth. From a Christian standpoint, that's ridiculous. God may give me life into my 80s and 90s. So, that's a illegitimate argument. We can go over to another topic if you'd like to, Donny.
Can I ask a question really quick? Is in your logarithmic graph, is your prediction that it will asymptotically go to zero?
Yeah. Let me see if I wrote the prediction here. No, I don't have the prediction, but it's sometime in the next 10, 20, 30 years it's supposed to go to zero. But the evolutionary geologists that I've studied under have said, oh, McQueen, don't worry about that. It will regenerate because we have evidence, according to them, in the magnetic signature of the ocean floor that this has been going on for millions of years. Now, do keep in mind one detail that a lot of even geology teachers overlook, and that is if you take the part of the North Atlantic between, let's say, Maine in the U.S., the maritime provinces of Canada, and go all the way across to Iceland, Greenland, Scotland, and Europe. If you look at that arc, if you will, there is some evidence of continental separation, but not as much as you would expect. In other words, we now have the ability to do a laser sighting all across from Maine through eastern Canada, Greenland, Iceland, and so forth. And the results of a study done by a scientist, Paul Lohman, at one of the research units in Maryland, showed that the separation is actually within the standard deviation of error of the method itself. In other words, in geology textbooks, they say, oh, well, it's about 2.5 centimeters a year. Well, if you actually look at the instruments that have given you that number, the standard deviation of error is about 3 centimeters. And so it's unreliable physical measurements that caused me to say that, my friend.
Could you repeat what you just sum it up for me? Sorry,
That's okay. I'll be glad to sum it up. In other words,
thank you.
We
appreciate that.
We can, if the three of us went to Iceland, there's a part of Iceland we could go to, and I could actually stand on the North American plate, and then you two guys could stand on the other plate that is east along a rift zone in Iceland.
Mm-hmm.
And if we camped out there with our wives and families, every few years we would see a difference. We would start out across from each other. Let me get my hands working here. And then as the years went on, as our children became teenagers and ran off with people from Iceland and got married and stuff, we would see a separation. And so the issue at stake here is, yes, you can go to places where you can see separation, but it's not adequate on a millions of year model. It is adequate on a 6,000 year model.
But isn't Iceland extremely volcanic? So wouldn't
Oh,
that
yeah.
mean wouldn't that mean that the ground is moving at a faster rate and more often than just standard continental drift?
No, not really, because the creation scientists like Dr. Steve Austin have traveled himself to Iceland and done a study there. And it turns out the rift in Iceland tracks south right to the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Excuse me. And so it is a very good place to study the separation of the North American plate from the Eurasian, not the Eurasian, but the European plate.
Gentlemen, we can do one of a couple things. I think we're moving along smoothly. We've really only got a few more minutes of discussion. We can either pick a final topic for David to go over, as he is in the affirmative. Basically, like if it was a debate on evolution, we would just kind of ask you, Charlie, as you know from experience,
Yep.
what's your next line of evidence? So why don't we do one final line of evidence? Professor McQueen, young Earth creation is on trial. We've discussed several great topics. We just discussed the decay of the magnetic field. And so is there a final topic you wanted to bring up to make your case for young Earth creation as we wind down the discussion?
Yeah, I do. And it's something near to your heart because it has to do with the biology involved in evolution. Donny's own work over the last couple of years has shown that even if you try to start looking at the Y chromosome and tracking it back through mitochondrial DNA or RNA, you come to a barrier, you come to a wall where all the scientific evidence indicates that the growth of human population of 8 people from on board the ark to 8 billion today can be explained, starting off with mom and dad, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. So starting with 8 people, you can explain the genetic diversity. Do you have an alternate view of that, Charlie?
Yeah. Based on the number of species that we have discovered right now on the Earth, not to the billions of species we have discovered, not to mention all the ones that we have yet to discover that we know are out there, it does not follow that all of this genetic variation could be on the ark, because we would still be discovering so many common species that are already well known, well documented to this point. If Noah and his family, including the kids and wives, that is not a very diverse gene pool. It's about as big as the Habsburg gene pool, and we all know what happened to poor Philip of Anjou. So I think there would be. I think based on that, I mean you would come to a point where the gene pool is no longer sustainable and we would all be sort of inbred, mumbling, drooling idiots.
Well, let me challenge you on that part. We cannot go back and know through blood chemistry what the genetic signature of Noah and his wife, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives, the 10 people that got off the ark, we can't know what that is, but we can look, excuse me, we can look to animal breeding and know that if I get a dog from the dog pound that is a true mutt, in other words, you look at the dog and he's 1/8 Great Dane, 1/8 Dachshund. You don't know where this dog came from. But if I get two mutts like that have a very large gene pool kind of built into them, I can take those two mutts and, given time, hundreds of years, I can breed everything from a Chihuahua to a Great Dane. And so, because we don't know the genetic signature of the 8 people that got off the ark, the question that you're posing can't be addressed in a scientific way.
But you just said if you got a mutt and bred it with another mutt, they would have a litter of mutts, and then you're proposing breeding the members of the same litter together?
Well, let me make my statement a bit more clear. In my boyhood, I owned 2 Boston Terriers, and these bulldogs were something that my mom and dad wanted me to have. It turns out if dogs go to hell, they end up me as their master, because I was not a very good master for these animals, but yet I tried. These 2 Boston Terriers came from litters. My dad wanted to have male dogs, so I had male dogs. But what if he had bought 2 Boston Terriers instead of the one, and they were male and female? As the years went on in my high school days, the dogs could have reproduced, and I could have seen litter after litter come along. Here's a detail that I picked up while substituting in an agricultural science class here in my area. The gestation period of a pig is 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days. And so if I switch my analogy to pigs, I could very quickly see the breeding going on. I'm saying that with the fact that Noah and his sons lived not 10 years, but hundreds of years after the flood, they would have had an opportunity to do what amounts to selective breeding.
And let's do this, Charlie. I want to be fair. Since David kicked off the start of each topic, let's give you a final word here, and then we'll move into closing statements. If there's something that Charlie says that, David, you'd like to respond to, we do have closing statements. You can certainly respond there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah. So I just, yeah, sure. With selective breeding, there are a lot of my family. They have a pug, right? And that's sort of an inbred mess, if you will, with breathing problems. And you've seen pictures of pugs in like the 1850s, and the faces aren't as smashed in or as mushed in as they are now. So sure, when you and it is well known and well documented, it's the same thing with the English bulldog, that they are products of incest. and thus have a lot of, like, all English bulldogs have to be born by cesarean section. So you can keep inbreeding to get more desirable traits. However, I'm still not 100% sure how that proves that the Earth is 6,000 years old. So that's my issue.
Okay,
If you
let me address that since you brought it up. Is that okay, Donnie?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, let me address that. The selective breeding of dogs, I know, began in England in the 17 and 1800s. And so if we use 1700, that's 300 years up to the turn of our century, add another 100 and another 100. And so not too distant future, we'll have 500 years worth of data about how these English breeders created everything from, let's say, my daughter has a West Highland Terrier that was bred to hunt down and stick their noses in the ground to try to find things like groundhogs and other creatures like that. And I have experimented with my daughter's dog when she's not looking, at least, and the dog will run over and begin to track a squirrel or something in Mississippi. And so as it gets going, I'll grab the creature by his tail and pull him. There's no pain involved. Why? 200 years ago, the nerves in some dogs were bred out of them so that their masters, if they went down the wrong hole, could just grab in there and pull the wee beastie out. And so I think that we don't fully know, even in our understanding of dogs of England, the full extent of what you're saying.
Charlie, have the last word. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, no disagreement that traits are bred in. That favorable traits are kept in and selectively bred in. 100% agree with you there, and in what you mentioned about the dog. Yeah, I feel sorry for the ones that weren't able to evolve that trait of grabbing it by the tail and not feeling pain.
But do keep in mind this, my friend, as you think about it. If you go back and read Origin of Species, actually read what Darwin wrote, a lot of his analogies are based around his observation of the breeding of animals when he was in college in England, and also his own observations on the voyage of the Beagle about how the bills of certain birds were different on the different Galapagos Islands, and especially different when he compared them to creatures when they went around the Horn of South America. So a lot of the evolutionary argument that I've been exposed to tie into Darwin's observation of human breeding of animals and so forth, and then expanding that back into geologic time, even though Darwin himself didn't think of the earth as 4.5 billion years old. He certainly thought of it as maybe a billion years or 100 million. He certainly disagreed with Ussher's 4004 BC. That's my only point.
Charlie, did you want a final word as we wrap up the discussion? It's been great, gentlemen. You've done a great job, both of you.
I think I am good. I think I am good. Yeah, I can't really speak too much about gene pools and whatnot, but if we definitely want to have that debate at a separate time, I would very much welcome that.
Yeah, in a couple of months, Donnie should get us back together again.
I 100% agree.
We'll get the full McQueen versus Charlie debate trilogy.
That sounds good. I've got 3 trilogies going on right now.
Yeah, you're going to be busy, Charlie. We're going to turn them all into epic Blu-ray sets.
And Mr. McQueen and Professor McQueen here.
Yes. Okay. Well, this was a great, cordial, technical, back and forth discussion. I really enjoyed the back and forth that you both have engaged in on these important topics. So very good. Very, very thorough. So let's get some closing statements. Gentlemen, take a few minutes each just to wrap up your thoughts, wrap up your points, and summarize the night so far. David, you're in the affirmative. So let's throw it to you. And you have, let's say, 5 minutes for a closing statement. The floor is yours.
Okay, good. My closing statement is that the Bible can be trusted. As I have studied geology over the last 50 years, as I've engaged in debates like this with my fellow students 50 years ago at the University of Tennessee, and then on to Michigan, and then in the years since, I have always focused on the fact that if we can have objective evidence, historical evidence, that the Bible can be trusted, that has tremendous implications. I would summarize it this way. I think there's geologic evidence for a rapid creation of granites, the way Bob Gentry has outlined it. Secondly, I think that there is a way to understand modern geology which would show that the Great Flood did occur. As the waters rose, certain things happened, and as the waters receded, those continental separation and so forth could be explained. Now, why is this important to me personally? If we can show that very huge events in the first 2,000 years of Earth history, creation, the flood, all the way up to the birth of Abraham. If we can show that, and then we can easily trace that Abraham lived about 2,000 years ago, when we add the additional 2,000 years, it becomes very reasonable that we're dealing with an Earth that's 6,000 years old. It's a topic for another debate. But if you look back in my debate history, you'll see that I have talked about petroleum and natural gas, copper, lead, zinc, gold, silver, all of these economic minerals that I've studied as an economic geologist can be explained within this 6,000 year context. Thank you, Donnie.
Thank you, Professor McQueen. I do appreciate that. For those that want to see your past debates, do check the description box of this video for a playlist to those. Okay, Charlie, or another skeptical guy, you have your closing statement now. And so go ahead. The floor is all yours.
So my closing statement is this. When we start with the evidence to reach our conclusion, we arrive to the number of around 4 billion years old for the age of the Earth. Whereas when you go the other way. When you start with the Bible, you just end up sort of circling in these ad hoc rationalizations for a preconceived belief. It is upon us, in the terms of intellectual honesty, and to not betray our own intellect, to be able to look at evidence, understand the evidence, analyze the evidence, and then reach our conclusions. And that's what we on the side of refuting young Earth creationism support. I find that in a broad sense, it is a lot easier to explain young Earth creationism than it is old Earth, not because the evidence is lacking, but because the evidence for old Earth and to understand evolution requires a level of scientific literacy that the average human does not possess, nor would they be expected to. But I thank the Honorable Professor McQueen for being here. I really enjoyed this debate, and I look forward to many more with you.
All right, very good, Charlie. You both made for an excellent debate, and so I do appreciate it, and I do look forward to more debates as well between the two of you. And so let's enter into our audience Q&A, and we've got some fantastic questions here for the both of you, and just a good mix of questions. And so, okay, let's get right into it, gentlemen. What we do normally on this channel in terms of the audience Q&A is, Charlie, let's say the question's for you. You get to respond first, of course. Let's try to wrap up our responses in roughly 2 minutes, maybe. I don't like to be too strict. Then David would get a response, and then you get the final word. So whoever the question is for gets the final word, basically. And let's start at the beginning. Question for both. Okay. So the question comes in from T-Rock. How can there have been a rock cycle for an old Earth if there is only evidence for one continental crust that is made largely of granite? Since Charlie ended with his closing statement, David, did you want to tackle this one first?
I'll be glad to. And it's a good question from Mr. Rock here that he's sent to us. The rock cycle that he's talked about is first introduced in junior high earth science, then on in geology classes in college. And it's the idea that erosion of a granitic crust, since Donnie's from Canada, let's use Canada as an example. So you've got the Canadian Shield north of the Great Lakes. That is hit with just ordinary erosion over millions of years. And those sediments move down to the area of the Great Lakes and then are put out to sea, if you will, by the rivers that go down into the North Atlantic. The creationist version of that same story of the rock cycle is that there was tremendous erosion during the 1 year of the Great Flood. It produced enormous movement from the continent to the continental shelf out to the deeps beyond the continental shelf. And we can find evidence for some of this massive movement east of the state of Maine. We can see it in the Baja California area, uh, uh, what's called the Gulf of California. And so I think the creation argument comes out well, given that the pre-flood continents were probably mostly granite, basalt.
Very good.
That's it.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that. Charlie, floor is yours. Go ahead.
Yeah. So there's only so just understand the question. If there's only evidence for one continental crust that is made largely of granite, well, obviously there is just one crust. It is the crust over the entire Earth. How is there a rock cycle? Well, if you just take a very small sample of rock, there is a rock cycle, and but on a large scale like granite, I'm sure individual samples are going through said cycle to be igneous, sedimentary, or metamorphic. It doesn't really matter where you start, but you answer your own question. It's a cycle. Metamorphic will become igneous, or sedimentary will become metamorphic, or igneous will go to metamorphic, or igneous will go to sedimentary. So it's a cycle. It's constantly replacing. So yes, granite is an igneous rock, so it'll constantly be becoming a different type of rock, and then it'll be coming back to igneous. Though perhaps I have misunderstood his question, but that based on what he has asked, that is the best answer that I can give.
Okay, Charlie, David, it was a question for the both of you, and so you both got to respond. Thank you very much. And we'll move on now to, this time, a question just for you, David. And so you'll get the last word here. Comes in from Scriptures and Stones. And there's what looks to be a paper here, 2020 or 2005, notes that the samples Gentry used in regards to the polonium radiohalos were rocks that had been reworked, thus not primordial granite. Would this pose a problem for his conclusion, David? Go ahead.
Well, this paper by Mr. B, I will call him since I don't know the correct French pronunciation. This paper that he brings up revolves around a problem that I saw in the mid-70s as a geology major that Bob Gentry never could overcome. As I would read his papers, because he'd give them to me to read and critique before he sent them off to Nature and Science and so forth. One of the problems I saw was what a geologist calls provenance. And that's the idea. Gentry traveled to Europe and went to some pegmatitic areas in Europe that included, I think, even a trip to Sweden or Finland, Norway. I can't quite remember where he went, but he collected some samples that he always referred to as the Wolfendorf samples. But I would challenge you. I'd say, you really need to put a chart in your publication that gives the latitude and longitude of where you found this sample. Was it weathered? Did you have to beat the rock 50 times to get it out? How pristine it was. But I never was able to convince now he was my boss, but he also, as the years went on, became my friend. I never could convince him of how much grief that would remove from his life for the reason that Mr. B here wrote in 2005. I don't think excuse me. See, I don't think that his claim there that Gentry was getting rocks that had been reworked and not primordial granites, that's, to me, an evolutionary scientist that is critiquing Gentry because he doesn't want to believe the most straightforward interpretation of the data. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Charlie, floor is yours. If you had anything you'd like to respond to, go ahead.
Nothing on that.
Okay, I appreciate it. We'll get a question in for you now, Charlie. And okay, let's see what we got here. RoboJet. Question for another skeptical guy. Can you explain the cold slabs that have been found submerged into the mantle, if you're familiar with those, Charlie?
I am not. Cold slabs.
I can elaborate since it was a short and sweet question. They've discovered these large slabs of cool rock deep within the earth. I think they go down just miles and miles.
Yep.
Into the mantle. And so the argument would say if the earth is billions of years old and those were taken down there millions to billions of years ago through tectonic movements in the earth, they should have warmed up or melted. But since they're still cool, they're still largely intact, then they must have been taken down there just a few thousand years ago, Charlie.
Let me elaborate on that a bit.
Sure.
Here is a piece of plywood that Ms. McQueen has found for me to do a task with tomorrow. And the idea of the cold slab is you can see that this is rigid. This is not the ordinary Play-Doh I use. But imagine this to be subducted down into the crust, past the crust into the mantle. And so you've got to have a mechanism to heat this up so that the material can go through the evolutionary idea of a recycled bit of material. Well, the research that especially my friend George Bond has done in Australia has shown that there are rigid slabs like that are cold even to this day. They're supposed to be like a million years old or 10 million years old. So the issue becomes, how can they remain that cold for that long in an evolutionary timetable? And my quick answer to you, my friend, is that they cannot. In an evolutionary timetable, they would have to get heated up and melt.
Unless they moved because of tectonic movement, tectonic shifts, right? You can have subduction, which is going to take some of those slabs under other parts, under other slabs of stone, other plates.
Yeah, your understanding is
come
correct.
From a cooler area to a warmer area, and that can happen on a much shorter time scale, and that's how I would explain the cold slabs. It's just the constant moving and shifting of the Earth's crust.
You're missing a part of the point here. Even the evolutionary community acknowledges that these cold slabs go down, but given a 4.5 billion year old crust, a 4.5 billion year old Earth with all this tectonic movement, you wouldn't predict that the rocks could still be measured as being cold. Yeah. It's a issue that if my opponent looks back on some of the debates that George Bond and me have done together, he will see the creationist argument here.
Charlie, you can have the last word. The question
Yeah,
was
I'm gonna have to stick with slabs that are moving from a higher, cooler part of the Earth's crust or mantle to a lower portion via subduction. That would explain why they're cooler, would it not? It would explain why they're cooler. It would explain why they haven't melted or anything like that.
Well, now keep in mind. Go ahead.
No. Please. You
keep in mind, my friend, that you're actually presenting a creationist argument in that. In other words, our prediction would be exactly what you said, that because the earth is young, these cold pieces of the mantle haven't had time to be heated up by the lower crust or the upper mantle. And so, how can I say it as kindly as I know? Thank you for making my point.
Well, no, I have to disagree with that. I said that tectonic movement shifts in the Earth's crust can happen on a much smaller time scale than 4 billion years or 6,000 years. So yeah, I'm sorry, but I have to say that is not that is using a
Charlie.
Yeah. Sorry,
just to clarify for the audience, as it is a technical point, are you arguing that these slabs could have been subducted just thousands of years ago rather than millions? Even in the deep time model?
Sure. Yeah. That in no way would disprove that the Earth is 4 billion years old. We would agree that we observe shifts in the Earth's crust, shifts in the Earth's mantle. Subduction is, I know there are a bunch of types of plate movement, but subduction I think is the one that applies here, of a plate moving from a higher to lower area, and obviously as you get deeper into the Earth's crust, it gets a little warmer. Or get deeper into the Earth, it gets warmer and hotter and all.
Donny, can we go on to the next question, please?
Absolutely. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Charlie, we'll give you the last word there as your question. And so the next one comes in from Lorraine. And, I'm going to combine two questions into one for you, David, because they relate. So this is short and sweet. Does McQueen believe in accelerated decay? But then Scriptures in Stones asked, I'm going to assume your answer is going to be yes, but of course you answer yourself, David, because they're wondering if, we'll start with this one, then we'll move to the second one, David. Go ahead.
Anyone with the last name Drosophila certainly deserves a good answer to this. The idea of accelerated radioactive decay is an idea that my friend and colleague, Dr. John Baumgartner, and also Larry Vardaman, who's retired in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, where all of us want to retire to. It's a beautiful area. These two creation scientists have worked for many years in trying to explain how, from a creation standpoint, we could get the separation of continents in several hundred years during and after the flood. And they have suggested the idea of accelerated radioactive decay. I respect my colleagues, and it's certainly the case that the God that we serve can produce miracles. There were miracles in creation. The Lord Jesus performed miracles in his earthly walk. So there's no question these can happen. And so I respect their theory, but I haven't completely bought into it.
Thank you, David. We'll throw it over to you, Charlie, if you had any thoughts.
About accelerated decay. Not too familiar with that term, though. Presumably, it's talking about the decay of a radiometric radioactive isotope at a
Yes.
faster rate, and so yeah, I don't doubt that can happen under certain catalysts.
Okay. David, did you want a quick final word and then we'll move on?
No, let's move on.
Okay, appreciate it. Next one we have comes in from Joe Wilson. I appreciate the question, Joe. Good to have you as well for our live debate tonight. Question for another skeptical guy. How does he explain polystrate fossils?
Polystrate fossils, as in fossils that are found in that are in more than one of the strata in the geologic column. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Let me pull out of the rack here one of the butcher knives that Ms. McQueen often threatens me with, and bring this over. Imagine this is some sedimentary rock in Tennessee, and here we have a tree that can be found going up through a number of layers. Mm-hmm. From an evolutionary viewpoint, that tree should have fallen down in 100 years or 200 years and been incorporated in this million-year-old strata that I'm holding. From a creationist standpoint, we can explain how the tree would have a sufficient root to hold it for a week or so as the sediments moved in, as the waters of the Great Flood receded. So the polystrate tree argument is a good one for creationism, I think.
So I've got sort of two answers to that. First one, it does not suspend any disbelief that a tree could have grown through multiple geologic years, right? So if you've got one layer that forms, and then millennia later you got another layer that forms.
Right.
Trees will always grow towards the sun. You've seen trees grow in a number of ways, right? So that does not shake my belief. That does not shake my belief in young Earth. Oh my God!
Did you just admit you converted?
Yeah, you guys got me.
Way to go! First
time. Go ahead, Charlie.
It does not. It does not shake my belief in the fact that the Earth is 4 billion years old at all, because trees we know can grow very, very old, and it does suspend. Trees will always grow towards the sun. It can grow through multiple geologic strata. That is not so much of a problem for us. And Donny, I saw what you just put in the live chat. You're going to get actual people to
the first formal debate, mid-debate conversion. So this will be talked about for millennia. Charlie, just kidding. I appreciate you being.
Can I respond to a clarification point, because I've got the chat up that I'm reading.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's sort of about that. So I see Stephen Tibbetts
Yes.
or Tibet if it's French, but it looks like probably Tibet. Trying to claim a tree can grow through millions of years of rock. Through it? No. But can sediment and rock deposit around it? Yes. So just I wanted to respond. Perhaps I didn't explain that wonderfully, but yes. Through it? No. Can it settle around it? Yes.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. David, any thoughts?
Let's go to the next one.
Okay. We'll get one for you, David, since we just had one for Charlie. And then I think we'll start to wind things down as we're coming up at the 2.5 hour mark. And I want to respect the time you've both given to us. So, okay. Question comes in from, well, most questions are for you, Charlie. So you're on the hot seat.
Oh, yeah. That's. Are you?
So George Bond, he's got a question for another skeptical guy. He's coming at you, Charlie. So he's asking, are you aware of the variance in discordant data in the dating database? He says in brackets, 29,000 records in the USGS website.
I'll jump in and say hello to George Bond, my old friend. Glad to see you in the debate.
Amen. Always good to see George. Charlie, go ahead.
Yeah. So, are you aware of the variance in discordant data in the dating database? Well, with any dating method, with any scientific method, there is error built in. We all know about standard deviation and all of that, and that is calculated through calculus. I remember a whole class at university about calculating error and standard deviation and the integrals, and I'm sure my honorable opponent also remembers how time-consuming that can be when you have to just go through and do all those calculations. And that's a whole part of a paper if you're writing a paper to show your error calculations. And yeah, there are going to be error bars in any time we run one of these tests. But they are within, with the exception of anomalous data, which we would all rule out as a indictment or supporting of any theory. Anomalous data happens in any field of research. So yeah, they're discordant data, things not matching up. Yeah, sure. There's always going to be margins of error.
But I'm afraid, my friend, you're missing the point of my Australian friend George. He's saying if you look at the dating database, that's 29,000 different analyses that the USGS has put together, there is a variance in the discordant data. Now, what he means by that is all 29,000 of those records that deal with 29,000 different rocks that have been collected and analyzed, some of the variance there is in what would be called discordant data. To give you an idea of what that would mean is, imagine that one rock was taken up high in a cliff, like my glass, and then underneath it, like this marker, somebody came down and took another rock sample. So this would have been Grand Canyon 1, and this would be Grand Canyon 2. So these get sent back to a lab. I work for the USGS in the Washington, D.C. headquarters. So it's sent back there and run through this analysis. It turns out that of these 29,000 records, some of the rocks don't fit in at all. In other words, how can I make it most simple? It's a standard rule of geology that the rocks underneath are older than the rocks above. And yet this discordant data shows just the reverse. And so my colleagues in radiometric dating like to say, "Oh, McQueen, you and George and the others, you're for heaven's sakes, we got 29,000 records. Not every one of them is discordant." Well, you don't need every one of them to be discordant because we're trying to prove that the Earth is old.
So is the majority of it discordant? Is that what the argument is?
Well,
Over 50% of the
that
records.
now that I have to do some research on.
Right. So that's my question there, right? Anomalous data will happen. Once again, there are shifts. Rocks, like if when Mount St. Helens erupted, right? You could get a rock that had just landed, and it would be millions years old because it was coming from the Earth's core, right? Things change, but if a majority of the strata, I would assume, is still going to say what you just said, that older rocks are going to be underneath and younger ones are going to be on top. So sure, there's, like I said, there's always going to be anomalous readings.
We're coming up on almost 2.5 hours for me, so I'm beginning to run out of steam. We'll return to that when we debate again in a couple of months, my friend.
Absolutely, it would be a privilege, Professor McQueen. I've really enjoyed this.
All right, gentlemen. Well, it's been a privilege for me to host and moderate this debate between the two of you. I believe you both have been very cordial, very generous with your time, and it's been a very technical and professional debate tonight. I've really enjoyed myself. So has the audience, and we've had a lot of excellent questions. Gentlemen, let's get some really quick final words, final thoughts, and then we are going to wrap up tonight's show. David, let's start with you, my brother. As always, it is a pleasure to have you here. And let's get some final words, final thoughts from you.
Thank you very much. I began my interest in geology in high school, which is over 50 years ago. And I went on through my undergraduate, my graduate years, continuing my interest in geology. And now I'm thankful to have both an undergraduate and a graduate degree in geology. After that, my focus shifted to science education. And so the science education that we hope that we are giving the audience between the three of us commenting is an important focus because we live in an intolerant world. Perhaps my buddies here, the two of you, would agree that it is a increasingly intolerant world. Constant arguments over the flood of Americans that are spilling into Canada in order to be part of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Just a little humor there. The argument is very extensive and is going to be ongoing. But the bigger question is, can we in our public schools, both in Canada and the US and in Europe, have an honest exchange about the difference between a 6,000-year-old possibility and a 4.5 billion-year-old possibility? Thank you, Donny.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate those final words, final thoughts. And again, thank you for 2.5 hours of your time, David. Charlie, thank you as well. I look forward to future debates. I've enjoyed hosting and moderating your event. So thank you for doing this. Appreciate your time. Final words, final thoughts?
Nothing. I want to thank David, Professor McQueen, for this debate. It was fantastic. I hope that you and I can, perhaps Donny can give you my email and we can have an email exchange. And
yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I always do better when I have when I can do long form writing out. But yeah, I do agree that there is a strong attack on and we live in such a divisive time now. Christian versus atheist, atheist versus Christian, or evolution versus creationism, rather. And I do think there were strong attacks levied against Christianity and most religions, which I do think some of the attacks are not well founded and are indeed bang out of order. But I do think that we should keep the discussions up. Keep trying to with a debate, the goal is to never change the opinions. I doubt you would. I doubt I would ever change yours, and I believe the converse is true. But it's to keep the discussion alive and going. But anyway, I appreciate the debate. Thank you for those in chat. T-Rock, I'm looking forward to my debate with you, and I'm singling you out because I had the chat open, which was my mistake. And I see some people saying things about me, and I'm like, you jerks.
Be nice to Charlie, guys.
Yeah. Come on, guys.
Well, one thing I'll comment about, and then I'll close with this, is Charlie and I are convinced tonight of the truth of our positions. So it probably is a case that would take a lot of weight of evidence for us to change. But I want to be honest enough and objective enough to say that there may be some items out there that would cause me to change my mind. Now, they would have to be very big items, but nonetheless, I will admit that perhaps I've misunderstood.
Very good. I really want to thank you both for the fantastic final words and final thoughts. Thanks again to the both of you for the time you've given to us. And I am going to let you, David and Charlie, get out of here. I'm going to stick around just for 2 minutes, going over some announcements for next week. So, David, thank you very much for joining. Charlie, we'll see you soon. Okay, there we go. Another one in the book, specifically a debate on young earth creation. I enjoyed it, as always, with these kinds of debates. And so to the audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We have another big week next week. Actually, I wonder if February and March are going to be two of our biggest months yet on Standing for Truth, as I have been working overtime, filling up February and March. February is fully booked. Got basically 5 events a week, plus there's plenty of shows that I want to pre-record in terms of my own discussions, and then also a continuation in the series that Matt, Kent, and myself have been doing. So February is going to be busy. It's going to be nonstop, but we are here to serve, and we are here to give you our awesome audience endless content to enjoy. And then March is the same thing. I am just finishing up booking March. A few more days I could fill in, and we've got some big events coming up, as a matter of fact, in March that I'm excited for. So next week is no different. Packed week of events, 5 more events, at least in terms of live shows. And so we will be here on Monday with Dr. Peter Line. So Peter and I, we're going to continue exploring the evidence for human evolution. This will be part 3. Specifically, we will be discussing Erectus and also Neanderthal. And we promise it'll be comprehensive, and also we're doing it live. So bring your questions, your challenges, and we'll engage those. We've also got an incarnation debate between CJ Cox and Carlos Xavier. I'm excited for this one. They debated Christmas at Christmas time, right around Christmas time. That was a lot of fun. I'm glad we got that debate in there right at Christmas. Okay. So this one, incarnation debate, did God become human? Important question. CJ versus Carlos. That's next week. We've also got Steve Christie versus David Preston next week. I'm excited for this one. Is the Apocrypha scripture? And as a matter of fact, this is going to turn into a debate series. So this is not going to be their only debate. We are in talks, or I'm in talks with them to have a series of debates. We've also got the great Millennium debate, Robertson Genis versus Phelan McFallon. I've been looking forward to this for a while. Pre-mill versus A-mill. I love the eschatology debates. That is for sure. And then we'll be wrapping up the week. I believe it's the 10th. So that's the Saturday with another Millennium debate. So we got 2 Millennium debates next week. That one will be Sean Griffin versus Scott Clem. Pre-mill versus A-mill. And so that is just next week's lineup of shows. My goal, hopefully in the next couple of days, is I really want to stream just a short program going over January and just give a recap of all the shows that we had, because we had a lot, and I want to make sure that our audience hasn't missed anything that they should be enjoying. And so, okay, if you're not yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that notification bell of all the upcoming events, and share this content around, because the truth is important, and also critical thinking is important, which is why we host so many debates on so many important topics, as it gets us out of our echo chambers and it brings us together for sophisticated discussion on all sorts of topics. And so with that, God bless. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you all later. Standing for Truth is out.